Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Let's Combinate. I'm your host, Subhi Saadeh, and we are graced and honored by Kirk Petyo, who is the managing partner at Talent Factory Medical and founder of Talent Factory Recruiting. Welcome, Kirk.
So that's some powerful words. I appreciate it, Subhi.
Yeah, no, I use that with everybody. No offense. Yeah. And honored, but I have had on some pretty spectacular guests. You're in
We'll
good
see how this
company.
goes.
So, Kirk, I wanted to bring you on a little bit about your background. You worked at one of the largest recruiting firms specializing in aerospace and medical device and pharma, all regulated industries. Then you branched out on your own, created your own company focused on medical, where you have some partners and do recruiting as well. I've started a bunch of journeys in my life, whether you look at podcasting, where I started out as a beginner and I had to talk to a bunch of people. And now I have the clear line of sight. And if I was to give somebody advice, I'd be like, do A, B, C, and D. Lifting weights, triathlon, same thing. As you become more proficient, career, no different. It becomes very clear to you what the levers are that you're supposed to pull on. You can give the advice of, here are the basic things that you need to do. I think there's two things that come to mind, and sorry for the soliloquy before I ask the question. A is when you give advice to someone, it has to be advice that they can follow, not what you would follow 10 years after. So
Yep.
that's the first part. The second thing is, as far as advice goes, it has to be something that is digestible and you're not telling them something as nebulous as network. Activate your network. I would say to a college senior, that's close to meaningless. I know a lot of people who are in the bioengineering space right now, or in chemical engineering or mechanical, and they want to get into medical device, are really struggling with how they go from where they are now to getting their first role. And so the question I have is for somebody who's a senior and they don't have a whole lot of experience and they don't have the benefit of going back and trying to network or get internships, what do they do in 2025 to help them secure their first role? Because I think also companies are not as interested, and maybe this is now old guy Subhi thinking that they're not as interested because I'm in a different part of my career. Maybe I don't have the visibility to what companies aren't interested in for engineer one or associate or technician. My perception is that companies are not as interested in hiring and developing as much anymore.
All right. I'll try to go all of those as
Yeah, we'll go back.
First of all, thanks again for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversations and getting to know each other over the last few months, and appreciate the opportunity to be here. About somebody who's entry level, if I'm painting the best picture I can about somebody coming into the market, an internship or a co-op coming out from a 2025 graduate is the best and ideal situation. Say you don't have that and you haven't had that experience, you didn't have that opportunity. Then the next thing is, did you work through school? Did you put yourself through school? Did you work through summers? And if so, what were those jobs? What did you learn? How can you relate? And what kind of experiences have you had, successes and failures in that process? Say you didn't have that. Let's look at the intern or the associations or groups or fraternities or sororities that you were involved in. What types of things did you get into? What was your roles and responsibilities? And what did you learn and gain from? Let's just say you have none of that. You went to school, say you got a scholarship or your parents paid for you to go to school. Now they're going to start to look at, okay, where did you go to school? What did you get your degree in? And then how did you do in school in regards to your GPA? And so all of this starts to stack up. Whether or not you want to admit it or not, it all starts to stack up. Now, let's had none of that, and then you have to start all from scratch. Your cards are stacked against you. However, there are a lot of different tactics and things you can start to do or to chance and to grow. One is, I believe wholeheartedly, the objective in your resume of what you want to do, the industry that you want to be a part of, and the roles and responsibilities that you get into. There's an aspect of being specific within that, some vagueness, maybe in regards to industry, knowing what you want to do and being tailored as you can to that. Second thing that I think is important to you is starting to get out and network and build relationships. Now, what I mean about networking and building relationships, I'm talking about free networking programs. There's a ton of seminars and speeches and things. M-Hub is a great example. If you're in the medtech industry, going to a lot of those seminars that are put on. And so there's a lot of things that you can get involved in. Now, if you're looking to get into an opportunity to where you're trying to be in medical or get into an organization, I can peel back the onion in regards to utilizing AI to understand the companies that you're applying to, being niche and copy and pasted that company into an AI tool, finding out what characteristics those companies look for, how you can tailor your resume. But first and foremost is you got to have a good objective. You got what you want to do. And then you have to really start to build relationships with people in the market. Even if you're going and offering your time for free, whether that's at a college or a startup organization that you go to and say, I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to make impacts in this industry. Is there anything that I can help out with and do on the side for you that could provide value to your organization? So hopefully I answered some of those questions, but that's where I would start in that situation.
Yeah, you just took me back down memory lane when you were talking about working through school. Is I sold cell phones all through college. And for me, I thought companies are going to look at me like I'm a fool and like, why didn't you get an internship? And I was discounted from a lot of roles, but learning the gift of gab was so helpful. And now that I have that, although when you're selling cell phones, like you're trying to build rapport with one person for 15 minutes, helping them out, and then on to the next one. It's like cutting hair almost. I think that has been the most important skill that I gained outside of school. I can't say that I was able to leverage it to get into my first role, but thinking like I'm an engineer who has a way about being able to speak, which is not common, definitely helped me try and solicit opportunities where, okay, I'm in a position where I'm trying to convince, to influence, to sell. I think that is really helpful as far as positioning. If you say engineer with a sales background, that is something. The other thing you mentioned was associations. Steve Jobs has this famous quote, I've never tried and asked for help and somebody didn't want to help. For me in my own podcast, I almost respond to 100% of the messages that I get.
Yeah.
And happy to help anybody who listens and wants input or feedback or advice. I do think that having a clear ask is really helpful. Going into the part where you were talking about being specific, I do think that's a skill, that's a life skill, professional and everything, like being able to say, I want to do this specific thing, and here are the things I need to do to get there. When you are somebody with no experience, you have no context, no background, and you don't even know what the roles are. One of the videos that I plan on making is 30 jobs that you can get with a bioengineering degree to show it's not just quality or regulatory or R&D, right? It's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
If you have no internship, no experience, just a degree, you don't know your head from your feet as far as roles go. How would you deal with that?
Yeah. The one thing I want to comment on you mentioned is asking for help, and just to debate that, people are human. We are human, and the human is to help others. And when asked in a polite and kind way, people will typically go out of their way in order to help you. If you're asking for advice or for help, we're human, and that's a giving nature in us. The 80 to 90% of the people you reach out to will have that instinct to be able to help you. To go back to the question that you asked about what types of roles are you getting specific in and how do you tailor that? Glad you asked a follow up to that, because there's a couple of ways to approach this. Let's just say you don't have an internship, you don't within education, is you can be specific in regards to, I'm looking to get into a biotech or medical device sciences company where I can utilize my experience in A, B, and C to move into an opportunity within regulatory or compliance or documentation process or design or development, validation, so on and so forth. What I think a lot of people do is they get so specific that they're overkilling their opportunities. They might say, I wanted to get into imaging, I want orthopedics, I want combination products, I want design, I want R&D. And those are the only types of opportunities. I think you're really limiting yourself in doing that. And what I think that does that stops the opportunity for you to get into an organization where you can get your feet planted and potentially move. It's about these big organizations, we'll say St. Jude, Medtronics, Boston Scientific, right? Just to throw out some major medical device organizations. Their R&D teams are only so big. Their innovation teams are only so, their new product development teams are only so big. Where are they going to have a lot of people that are going to have no experience, who they can kind of validate, see how they're doing, test them against the other people, weed out the bottom performers, like Welsh would talk about, and promote those middle to high performers? They're going to bring those in as document control specialists, validation, test protocol, people that are working with design controls and risk management files and doing the process side of the year or two. And so getting into an opportunity where you're going to get exposure to those messages and engagements, I think is critical. So when I'm talking about being in a resume, it's talking about getting into an opportunity where you can utilize those skills, but not being so specific to where you're like, I want to do dental implants design, or I want to do X-ray imaging development, because then you're so narrowed, then I think you really limit. Because when a recruiter is going to look at your resume, that objective is your first 10 to 15 seconds of somebody looking at a resume. We're deciding whether or not we're going to call you or not. And that's just the facts. So if your GPA is low, if you have no experience, you have no internships, you aren't a part of an association, and I don't know what you want to get into, and you don't know what you want to get into, easy to just pass that candidate and click the next.
You were talking about human nature and the nature of humans to want to help. I do agree with that, but I also think there's a side of human nature focused on incentives. There's a famous book, 48 Laws of Power, and he talks about one of the laws is cover each person's thumbscrew. In other words, understand a person's incentives if you want to understand their worldview. Now, when it comes to recruiters, like you were just talking about, I got my first role, two roles actually. I was applying for, I got married before I finished college. So I think I sent 500 applications in 6 months. It felt like I sent 500 applications. Didn't get any. I got one interview in April or March before I graduated. I graduated in May. And I'm like, oh no, please God, I don't want to be the guy that's 6 months or a year later trying to find a job and complaining about how tough it is out there. I got two interviews on the same day, and it was pouring rain in Chicago. I ended up showing up an hour late to Hospira, which was my first interview. Everybody knew the weather was trash. Half the people that worked at Hospira were late that day. I got some grace that day, and they liked me. I thought the interview went okay, even though I was very late. Then I hung out, chilled out, and went to Baxter. It was like, the first interview was like 9 a.m. The second one is at 2 p.m., something like that. Then I go to Baxter later on and did relatively well. 2 days later, I have two offers when I had basically no prospects 2 weeks before. It felt like fate and serendipity all coming together. I ended up going with Baxter. One thing I remember is that the recruiters were involved and interested. I felt like they actually wanted to get me. It didn't feel like I'm just some resume on the desk moving forward. It felt like they actually cared in both cases. I don't know. Is that still the case? Are there a lot of entry-level contracts? Is there incentives in industry for that? Or are companies now more focused on just paying an extra 15, 20 grand and getting somebody with experience that you don't have to train as much as somebody with no experience?
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm familiar with Baxter and a lot of the individuals. Back in the day when I was working with Hospira, Pfizer, and hiring a lot of folks, a big flux of entry level or level 1, level 2 types of engineers. And that wasn't uncommon and still isn't uncommon. I believe that, and what I've seen in the industry over the last few years, and maybe over the last 15 years, is that these organizations have to do a few things. One, they have to create a pipeline of individuals that are the future leaders and the few people that are going to take their company to the next level. And while they can go out and hire a lot of great individuals who are 10, 15, 20 years in the industry, comes a price tag with those people. There's also a piece of being able to get some of the work done. You think about organizations like a Hospira back in the day, or like you mentioned, through what it's a consent decree, or maybe it's an FDA warning letter, or maybe it's a remediation. There's a lot of documentation, risk management requirements, working with doors and different tools like that, where process driven and don't want to hire a 15 to 20-year person to drive all of that stuff. They might be leading that, managing or leading the individuals that are doing that, but there is an incentive to hire people like that. And I see these bigger organizations like the ones that I had mentioned, hiring pools of candidates of 10, 20, 30, 40 people. What's going to separate, you talked about, ability to have those intangibles. You communicate. How do you talk about your passions or your desires? How do you connect? Are you likable? Have the ability to talk through about why you're doing this, your purpose of getting into this role and getting into an opportunity like this. It's interesting. I had a lunch on Tuesday last week with a client, and they're hiring a few different people. They're hiring an entry level role, like a level one, a senior level, which is like a 6 to 10 year engineer. And then they're hiring a principal level, which is that 15 plus year person. That's kind of like that subject matter expert, the one leading the team. It's interesting. We were walking through, and in the senior as well as in the junior level, the picture that I was painting was you're looking for somebody who graduated from an accredited school, whether or not it's biomechanical engineering, biomedical, bioengineering, a little bit of mechanical, so on and so forth. You want them to come in eager. You want them to be hungry. You want them to work hard. You want them to take on tough tasks, being able to interact and work with people for help, ask for feedback, make mistakes, and want to learn. And they're like, yes, that's exactly what I want. And it's like, it's not a tangible skill set. And it's more about the ability to learn and grow. And so these bigger companies, that's what they want. And then they feed that pipeline of 10, 20, 30, 40 people they hire. And those people have an opportunity to maybe they didn't get the best GPA like I didn't in college. Maybe they worked themselves through school. Maybe their parents couldn't afford to do that. My parents couldn't afford to send me to school and pay for everything. I had to work for my dad. I had to work at Gander Mountain. I had to work at the golf course at Purdue to put myself through school so I can afford food, going to the bar, all those little things. To be able to then go in, fight, tell that story, and sell yourself, those are the things that I think companies look for.
Yeah, I think one thing you said there, I started to realize more recently that if I look back and think of the things that I used to think were important, and if I look at when I was a student and what I used to think was important, and now what I think is important, they are not the same. So when I was a student, you should try and highlight and sell every experience that you have, particularly when you don't have a ton that you can pull from. But I would put a lot of emphasis on my research at Rush University. And I didn't realize how little the fact that I did that 3 or 6 months of research actually mattered as much as the attitude that I'm professing. Because in reality, from an entry level point of view, those skills are not transferable. Yes, it shows that you worked in a lab. So you may understand how to write in a lab notebook, but that takes 5 minutes to learn, or it takes an hour or two to learn. And I think the other thing that I learned is even though you may perceive a month, 2 months, 3 months of taking time to learn a process in a company, even people that are way experienced take a couple months before they become actually usable in a company because training and processes and access and all that stuff. I'm not saying experience doesn't matter. I'm saying there is an expectation that you have a learning curve when you start at a company, especially when you have no experience. So what would you recommend to people who are like, all right, I'm 6 months away from graduating or 3 months away from graduating. You've thrown a lot at me. Do I just try and find a contract? Do I focus on using ChatGPT to help me with my resume? How would you approach it if you're starting from zero and you're about to graduate? What's step number one?
You're not on step number one, but if you are on step number one, I think first and foremost, it's really important to understand what you want to do and the why behind that. It's really interesting to talk to people, especially on the entry levels. And I have a tendency to hear a lot of the same message. It's okay, you went to school. Let's just say you went to Illinois. You graduated with a mechanical engineering degree. You got a 3.5. Didn't have an internship. You worked a little bit through school, in the summers and stuff, but that was kind of the extent. And I get your next opportunity or opportunity in this field? What is it that you want to do? A lot of times people don't even know whether it's design, development, validation, verification, systems, testing, manufacturing. I can go on a list. You talked about 30. I can probably go 30, maybe 40 different roles that companies will hire for. But you have to understand what that why is. Because one, go in and sell yourself to an organization if you don't have that why and that. And two, how can you connect to the opportunity? What is going to be important if you don't even know why or the reason you want to get into that? So before you go GPT, before you pull up your resume and you're going through all of that and you're making modifications and doing all the legwork, you really have to understand your inner core, what makes you tick. And once you get that, then you can really, it's interesting. I want to him out there because I know he wants to change industries. He's not in the medical device industry. Him a year and a half to figure out what he wants to do. Love him. He's a great guy. And it just took him that long to figure out exactly the change that he wanted to make to move his career in a different direction. You can't force somebody, but interviewing for jobs and not getting them. And I know why, because when you go and you're having that conversation, I'm interested in this job. And the answer is, I just want to get out of what I'm doing. I'm looking for an entry level job. That is the worst possible answer that you can give. Now, there is step two. You know, you're interviewing with a Baxter and you throw into ChatGPT and you say, what does Baxter do? Tell me the 10 things that are important to this organization. Is their mission statement? You can do a lot of things that AI can help you with. But if you don't know the core of what's fundamental to you, you can't go in and sell what's fundamental to that organization. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, totally understand what you're saying, but maybe devil's advocate. Let's say I'm about to graduate and I'm like, dude, I do not have a year and a half to sit there. I can't go on The Alchemist and try and figure out what the universe is going to tell me what I want to do. I need a paycheck.
By the way.
I need a paycheck. And I have a bioengineering degree and I'm excited about it. That's as specific as I can get right now. I can maybe say I want to go into pharma or medical device, but I don't know really the difference because I haven't worked in either. So I could put something on my resume. Let's say the why is I need a job. I've heard you talk about the different levers. So there's money, autonomy, flexibility, pay time off and vacation. There's all the different things that a company can give you. It's not just money. But when you're coming straight out of school, you need something that is greater than zero that's coming into your account on a consistent basis. And that for most people in the beginning is their like primary driver because it's a validation that like I didn't just waste 4 years of my life. With PTO and all the remote and all that other stuff, that could come later, 5 years in or whatever. But what if somebody just wants a job?
I love this conversation because you're pushing back a little bit and I will push back. So let's say you're interviewing two people side by side and you have somebody that comes in and says, I'm just looking for a job. I'm just looking for an opportunity. I don't really know what I want to do. And graduated, I don't want to be looking for a job in 6 months. And in that picture, that's very common. Now the other person comes in and
Is
says,
it common?
oh, it's very common. I say it all the time. Now, I'm not saying that the people that are getting hired, I'm saying that
Right.
that's what a lot of people say. Now, on the flip side of that, you've got somebody that comes in and says, I went into this degree because I wanted to make an impact. I went into biomedical or bioengineering, or I went into mechanical engineering because I had a passion for design or develop, very mathematical. I want to solve problems. Now there is a why, the purpose there. There is an inner core of what makes you tick. And if I'm interviewing those two people and I'm separating those, now I'm going to pick candidate two. And the reason for that is they have done thought leadership of what is important to them outside of money, outside of just a paycheck, but there is an inner core. Because here's what's going to happen when a challenge comes up or you're faced with your first piece of adversity in that organization. That leader or manager needs to be able to understand what's going to make that person tick. How am I going to get them through this? And do they have a bigger purpose than just money? It drives a lot of individuals, but there are subsets of other purposes behind money that actually make people have a purpose. That's what you have to understand.
Yeah. And I agree with that. I don't think that's actually pushback at all because I agree with
Okay.
everything that you said. I'm not saying that's what you say in an interview. I'm
Right.
saying that is your true why. I'm saying, like, if I have no income and I'm trying to get an income, the fact that I love solving problems is irrelevant. I'm not saying that I lead with, hey, I need an income in the interview. I'm just saying that I've interviewed some people who are very entry level. And if they are like, it's actually been my life dream to come and remediate this DHF, even though I personally love DHFs, I love remediation projects. I like to put on my magnifying glass and try and understand the history behind I love remediation.
Yeah.
But if somebody with no experience is like, hey, I just went to school for 4 or 6 years and now I have a master's in bioengineering and I'm so excited to sit at a desk and work on documents, I'd be like, all right, dude, save it. I know there's a reality to it. And this is where I'm at. Let me know if you disagree with this approach.
Yep.
I am somebody who has gone through a lot of adversity up to the point of graduating college. I know what I'm made of. You can put me in a remediation project. You can put me in a lab. You can put me in 6 out of 10 normal entry level engineering roles, and I would thrive with 95% plus confidence. I actually didn't thrive in my first role because it was mismatched with what I'm naturally weakest at. That was my issue. But as soon as I switched, it was like, boom. And that's where somebody who's a college student, I think that if you're working with a recruiter, I'm not saying you say this to a hiring manager. I'm saying you shouldn't try and impress the person you're asking advice from because they're working with missing information. If I call Kirk and I say, Kirk, I'm really passionate about solving problems and excited to get into industry, I give you the spiel. You're like, all right, I got a guy. I think he's good. But if I say, Kirk, here's what I'm made of. I know I can be successful in a job. I need a job ASAP. And you're a recruiter. You're not the hiring manager. I know I'm going to make you look good, Kirk, when you put me in a role. And I'm a relationships person, and I hope that this relationship can bud from this. I think that's a honest and reasonable way to approach a recruiter because they're not just, oh, this person's 22 and they're living with their parents.
Yeah. Well, so what I would finish with is you are 100% right in telling that story and focusing on that passion. Now tell me the why, right? Because I have to tell your story. I'm a recruiter. I get paid to find the best talent on the market. I don't get paid to find available talent. I get paid to find the best talent on the market. At least that's what I tell my clients. And so I have to be able to understand where that why comes from because I have to tell the story about you that's going to separate you from John Doe. It's interesting. I'll tell you an example. I hired this person for Hospira years ago. She celebrated her 10th year within the organization. She now manages the systems and risk management team at ICU Medical. And I hired her. She was the 15th person I hired on this one team that we hired. We hired 15 people in about 4 weeks. And it was a crazy endeavor to hire all these systems engineers. She was the 15th person. And I'll never forget the story. She was a master's degree, I believe it was in biomedical engineering, and moved to a location that did not have a lot of experience or locations that had medical device or pharma or those types of companies in that area. What I found out about her desire and passion to make a difference and how she was going to show up and how that purpose was going to go. And what's interesting is I went to the manager and I said, you have to hire this girl. She is the best of all of them, but she doesn't have any experience. One, you got to believe me. Wait to her and you'll see what I'm talking about and the way that she communicates, the way she holds herself, talks about making an impact in this industry. And I said, she's willing to take a pay cut to come in to show you what this is. And all I ask you, Mr. Manager, is within the next 4 weeks, you decide whether she's good enough. And if she is, give her the pay raise to pay her what everybody else would be. And he said, done, I'll do it. And 10 years later, she's now managing that team and is still within that organization because I understood that way and could tell that story to the client. That's where I think that separation.
Excellent. I think that makes sense because what I'm hearing is that we're not saying things that are different. You can communicate, hey, I need a job ASAP. and ultra particular about what it is, so long as I can use my degree. I'm really good at A, B, C, and D. This is what I'm passionate about. This is what I'm excited about. For me, the first part of I needed a job ASAP because I was 20, 21 and married, and my wife was going back to get an MBA and she was not going to be working anymore. That was my actual situation. But what was also true is I got into bioengineering as a pass through. I started as a chemical engineer because my dad, who passed away, was a chemical engineer. Then I discovered that I actually wanted to do bioengineering. After 2 years, I did bio-E, then I did chemi, then I switched to biochemy, and then I switched to bio-E at the end. So that is my actual story. Both of those things are true, but you having the full picture, I guess the way that I would summarize this part of the conversation before we move into this next topic is you are still working on partial information if the only thing that you know is what I said. You know, there's the what drives you and help me sell you, and then there's the current situation that paints where I'm at actually and what I need. So that's phenomenal, actually. Thank you for squaring that circle for me. Now, you mentioned the BioE, BME. My most popular video, for whatever reason, is a bioengineering degree worth it in 2025. Don't know why. It seems like it just took off. I don't know why people are really interested in that. One of the questions that I get on that video all the time is BioE versus BME. Should I do mechanical and then try and get into medical? I've gotten to the point now where I feel like it doesn't matter basically at all, so long as you're an engineer. I do think it's worth it. Is it way better than getting ME? I would say you're definitely not going to get into pharma with mechanical, unless you're working in combination products or something like that. And so people will look at something like mechanical and that it's super broad and that it's something that I can land anywhere, but it does filter you out of certain industries like BioE or pharma or things that have to do with micro sterilization or whatever. You're not going to be able to get into that. So what do you think?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I did a poll on this coming into this conversation, knowing we might talk a little bit about this. And the poll was, is it the right path to go into bioengineering and biomechanical engineering currently, or is it better to go more the traditional route with a mechanical, manufacturing, industrial, electrical engineer, or does it really matter? And what was interesting is that this poll actually got a lot of hits. We got 60 plus votes. We got a ton of comments from a wide range of different people. And took away from this is that I think it really depends on what your view is, what your purpose is, and what your strategy is going into this. Because the individuals that had the bioengineering, most of them were like, it's to go down that route. You have a purpose. If you want to be in life sciences and some biotech, pharma, combination products, medicals, or other, you have a passion and a purpose, and you're going to fight through the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows, and you're going to figure out a way to get it done. Now, some of the other ones who didn't go down that path were the opposite. They were talking about how a mechanical engineering degree is a better fit because or an electrical engineering is a better fit. And then maybe you biomechanical or a biomedical engineer on top of that if you want to stay in life sciences and develop IoT, connected products, cybersecurity, so on and so forth. Now, going into this, I was actually on a call on Thursday with a VP of quality, and we were talking about this combination product company. I'm like, what's your thoughts? And he validated it really comes down to your purpose and what really makes you tick, going back to that original thing I was talking about. And do you really want to stay in that segment for your career? Are you open to maybe things that are outside of that? Regulated is regulated, can be medical products and life sciences, could be aerospace, could be defense, could be some sort of food, process, chemical types of things, right? They're all process and regulated in some aspects. Now, if you have an aeronautical degree and I'm a recruiter, biotech company, I'm probably not going to call you first because I think that you went into aeronautical engineering because you want to design planes or jet propulsion or something in that regards. Now, on the flip side with mechanical or biomechanical engineering, I think you're going to do the same thing. If I'm an aerospace company, am I going to call you? And the tendency is no. And so my advice and feedback, if you don't know what you want to do and you're looking for something that's a little bit more broad, go into a more traditional route and then go segment it down the route after you find out what you want to do. College students don't typically know what they want to do, but the ones that do want to be a designer, a developer, a systems engineer, want to be in quality or something like that, and they know and they have a purpose in that, sciences or medical device side, then go in the biomechanical engineering in that similar background is the better route for you. So it comes down to that purpose again.
You know what, dude? When I talk to my friends who are in my age bracket, plus or minus a few years, some of them work in, I have a bunch of friends that work in IT, other friends that work in like nuclear or whatever. Some of my friends are like medical doctors and nurses. I think all your jobs are totally lame. If the only reason you're getting a mechanical or chemical degree is so you could work at like a industrial machine lubricant company, a fallback option, it's no, I think you should get a BioE degree. That's your rainy day scenario. I think the way that people sometimes will look at the BioE BME situation, is it a death sentence? Is it something that's going to go away? Am I never going to be able to find a job? Not as much a, hey, if I don't like it, I want to be able to switch into something else. I think most of the students that I've talked to have that fear. Is bioengineering too non-specific, too new, where I'm going to be left with an expensive piece of paper?
That's really hard to answer. And I believe the reason that it's really hard to answer is that medical device and life sciences is, I'm not saying it's been recession proof. I won't say that because I think 2025 has proven that there are some challenges that have hit from tariffs and a lot of things that have gone on. Now, the thing that I look at with this, and the reason I do what I do on the medical device side is I feel like I'm impacting people. I feel that there is a purpose. And so when things get tough, I know that I'm doing this for a reason and I'm supporting the right industry because there's something more than just making a paycheck and placing a candidate. There's a bigger purpose there. So when you're in this industry, I believe there's a purpose to really fall back on through tougher times. But the other thing that I think about is that medications, prescriptions, technology, it's not going away. Everything is becoming, you think like wearables, a lot of things are becoming IoT and connected in some aspects. Combination products, the at-home care side of things, being able to administer a drug to your body, whether it's a pen or some sort of other technology, is continuing to grow. Think about the ability to add cybersecurity to technologies and how that's going to continue to advance. You've seen this, the changes within the FDA. And you think about products, things coming back to the US in regards to tariffs. There's so many things that are on that from a job security are there. I really think it comes down to, if there is an ebb and flow, are you going to have that passion and desire? And again, going back to that purpose side, did you just get a biomedical or a bioengineering degree because that's what you decided? Or was there something inherently in there that made you go into this, got you excited about being a part of what this industry does? And that's making impacts on patients and on people.
Who is never short of passion. I don't know if you've ever worked with anyone who got into BioE or biomechanical in particular for prosthetics. Those guys are typically made of motivation and energy. I haven't met one person who's, I want to work at Shirley Lab or Depew or whatever, the prosthetics, where they're not just beaming about the work that they do.
Yeah.
For short on motivation, those are the guys to talk to.
Yeah, I want to make a quick comment on that too. And I think that comes down to the company and how you drive value and how you within your organization. There's a wheelchair organization that I've helped hire a few people for over the last year or two. I've never worked with a wheelchair company. I know of two types of wheelchairs. I know the manual wheelchairs, and then I know chairs like Costanza had, the 4-volt versus the 6-volt. Anybody who watches Seinfeld get that joke. But it's a powered wheelchair. And so in working with this organization, we realized that there's actually multiple types of wheelchairs. Now, what I really liked about working with them is the story I can tell about their organization, what they were doing, the impacts, and the purpose that they were trying to make. And one of the things, I hired a program manager and I hired an electrical software firmware developer that got promoted to a manager. conversations I had 6, 12 months after, what do you love about your job? One of the things that they love is people coming in that they get a chance to work with who are impacted in their lives and need access to wheelchairs. What I love is that this company got people excited about their product. A manual wheelchair doesn't have a ton of advancements to it, right? But there could be customization based on your size, based on your weight. And then on the other side, people that are impacted to where maybe they don't have the ability to physically move their body and they only have a joystick, and being able to control and have a life and seeing that again, that comes down to that purpose. And I love when companies can bring everything back to something that's more important than just a paycheck and painting those pictures of why you do what you do.
And I do think that because you were talking about technology earlier, there is going to be resources, people who are technical that are needed for that. At the same time, you can look at that as the tails of the curves, whether it's the amount of people that you need to manage cutting edge. The reality is that most people are needed to continue the state of the art currently. And as things go higher volume, as you increase capacity, you need people to make regular wheelchairs still. You need people to fill IV bags, not actually fill, but oversee the qualification, the commissioning and qualification of, yeah. For one reason, I think caffeine hasn't fully entered my blood quite yet, but
This is an early morning one. So
yeah,
I do all my podcasts in the afternoon.
Yeah, once I'm nice and warmed up. Actually, one of the things that I typically do that I did not do today is I'll just make a bunch of calls before I will podcast. So I'm like crazy warmed up. It's really, I do the same thing whenever I interview as well. That's a good technique. So I'm not cold. But as we move to close, one question that I had is with the Biosecure Act and other stuff that's coming through, tariffs you mentioned, I think there's going to be a lot of onshoring in the US. Based on your discussions with executives and other people, is this coming up a lot? If it's onshoring, manufacturing sites typically are not full of multi PhDs. Is this conversation being had? Is it too far out as far as horizon planning? I do think that would offer a lot of exciting opportunities for people who are coming out of school in the next couple of years.
Yeah. To answer your first question, are people talking about this? 100%. Launched a podcast yesterday with called Combinate, which is a life science company that does everything from product development to manufacturing and setting up facilities, so on and so forth. And all of our clients, every company, whether it's a pharma company, whether it's a medical device company, whether it's a startup company, there are aspects in one bucket. You talked about onshoring. It is a major topic right now in regards to, okay, how much does it cost us? Say we're developing our products or manufacturing in China. Now, with the tariffs and the different costs, is it actually going to be cheaper for us to do the work here? Do we continue those tariffs and bring in our products into the US? Every organization is looking at this. Now, as we're looking at, you talked about the commercialization side of things and manufacturing and making products here in the States. It's a major conversation that's happening now. And whether or not you're in manufacturing, whether or not you're in the services side, it's all talking about optimization and controlling costs. So you think about manufacturing, you're thinking about industrial engineering. These are going to be major roles that are going to play a key piece in regards to cost savings and cost reduction. It's just going to be a key aspect. And what I think is going to be even more important is to two companies last week that I've known and worked with for a long time. They have done a lot of their manufacturing in China. They're already looking and changing to different countries based on the costs and already started transition into other markets because they're trying to get ahead of this rather than being reactive and letting this continue to go. They're trying to stay proactive in this. Now, I don't know what countries they're going to, but companies are adapting. And as they start to adapt in regards to the manufacturing and process side of things, engineering, controls engineering, robotics, industrial PLCs, and industrial engineering are going to be, whether you're going through commercialization or whether or not these companies want to figure out a way to optimize and control costs are going to be key.
Do you work with people who are entry level?
I used to do it a ton. I think there are the recruiting companies that specialize in a lot of contract hire for organizations. They're your best bet to work with. They can go to a UIC or an Illinois or a Wisconsin or Milwaukee School of Engineering and get some of those candidates and give them an opportunity to get into these med tech companies. Typically, companies don't want to pay for my services to hire entry level people. I see more of my opportunities more from like the senior engineering roles to directors and executives and everything in between, because those are a little bit more of the hard to find niche roles versus you weed through 50 resumes. I want to have the best 5 candidates and put those people in front of me.
I am going to ask you, where can people find you? What are those companies? How do people get in touch with them if they're looking for entry roles?
Yeah, your big organizations, they're former Aerotech. I think they're really good at this. I've got a few friends that place a ton of these people within organizations in the Chicagoland market and throughout the country. Kelly Services has a medical device division. I think they do a really good job. Manpower has another medical device and life sciences division. Probably miss a few, but these bigger
Randstad, are they still around?
Randstad is still around, Adecco is still around, and let's just say if you've got an MSP, a master service provider with a big company like Baxter or AbbVie or Boston Scientific, for example, they open 30 positions for a commissioning project of setting up a new line, and they need a ton of people to do a lot of document control, entry level documentation, and they want people to come in and do this. They'll bring those people in like a contract to hire. That is the perfect opportunity for them. I wish I could do that. It's just not my expertise, so I can't really help those people, but happy to point you in the direction of those individuals who specialize in that, as there's definitely a niche for that.
Where can people find you?
So they can find me in 2 places. They can find me on LinkedIn, Kirk Petyo, last name is Petyo. You'll see I post a lot. I'm very consistent in my messaging. I host a medtech podcast that I utilize, which is called Trust the Experts, to really learn, to gain knowledge, and to continue to grow. Every time I do one, I'm learning consistently. The other place that they can go on is talentfactorymedical.com. And we have 2 parts of our organization: Talent Factory Recruiting, Talent Factory Medical. And everything I do is life sciences, tech, med tech, medical device, combination product, so on and so forth. You can reach me at either one of those 2.
Thanks for coming on, Kirk. This was fun.